joining us live is Anthony Lewinston, who is an independent journalist and the author of the Palestine Laboratory. He's joining us live from Bali. Thank you so much for joining us on WION, Lewinston.
Thank you so much for having me.
Right. Now, Lewinston, the US has beefed up military assets and troops in West Asia, most of them on a high alert as well. The war has been going on for, we're in the 17th day. I want to seek your assessment that will we see any active US participation?
Well, we certainly hope not, because the current conflict between Israel and Hamas is bad enough, which obviously is killing huge amounts of Palestinians in Gaza, causing mass destruction within Gaza, and of course also harming people in Israel as well. The US presence there, of course, is vital for Israel, because Israel fears, and I would argue so does the US, of a potential another front. So if, say, Hezbollah gets seriously involved from Lebanon, it's arguable whether Israel is even able to manage that on its own. And I say that because since Netanyahu has been Israeli Prime Minister in the last year or so, a bit less than a year now, a lot of evidence suggests that the military in Israel has been degraded hugely, and a lot of people are deeply concerned, in fact, even in the last 2 weeks, that the military actually is not capable of fighting one war, let alone two. In other words, one with Gaza and one with Hezbollah. And the US presence there, I guess, is partly as almost like a quasi-shield for the US. But the idea of the US getting actively involved in a war zone is the worst possible outcome, because if that happens, Hezbollah potentially is involved, and also Iran, which would be potentially a massive regional war, something we all want to avoid.
Absolutely, Mr. Lewinston. I was just coming to the point you made there of Hezbollah actively getting involved in the war, and especially with the violence, the war between Israel and Hamas militants raging unchecked, especially with fire exchanges on the Israel's northern border with Lebanon. There are fears that Hezbollah could enter the conflict, the point that you made there, and there are also growing concerns of a multi-pronged war.
Look, one of the things I think that Hezbollah probably is doing is testing Israel's defences on the north around Lebanon to see how active they are, how possible they are to potentially get involved with Israel longer term. And Iran is probably sitting back now thinking to itself that they're in a relatively good position, namely that they had some involvement. We don't know exactly what. They have funded Hamas in the past. We don't know if they had any direct involvement in the recent Hamas attack on Israel. And Iran, in fact, is trying to have a much more bigger role in the Middle East. I would suggest that Iran does not want a regional war, because militarily they arguably will not win against America. But even talking about that, the prospect of that is so catastrophic that this has to be de-escalated. There needs to be some kind of massive pressure on Israel, the US, and other players here to have a ceasefire in Gaza, because otherwise, ultimately, what Israel is moving towards, I fear, is what they wrongly perceive is a military solution to what's happening in Gaza. There is no military solution. You can destroy Gaza, you can try to remove huge amounts of Hamas infrastructure and its people, but then what? There is no real plan. There was a Reuters report a few days ago interviewing huge numbers of Israeli officials anonymously.
Yes.
And the conclusion was exactly this. There is no plan if and when Hamas is overthrown, which is a disturbing thought.
Absolutely, Mr. Lewinston. You speak of how there is no plan about when this war will come to an end. We've also seen various leaders visiting Israel and also holding talks with the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. Who do you think is able to, at the moment, go forward with the de-escalation of the ongoing war?
Well, most of the countries that are sending people to Israel are not interested in de-escalation. I'm talking about Joe Biden or the British Prime Minister or other leaders from most Western countries. There is seemingly no interest in de-escalation. In fact, they're seemingly supporting almost uncritically Israel's brutal, arguably genocidal war against Gaza and its people there. This is what's so disturbing. Where are those serious voices? To me, it is logical, hard to acknowledge that there needs to be engagement with Hamas. Now is the time to talk to your enemies. You don't have to like your enemies or even embrace them. You need to talk to Hamas. You need to find some way to get through this, because military solutions in Gaza, having spent